My name is Jon Corbin, and I'm here to hear your stories. Today, my guest, a Canadian rap sensation, although he hates it when people call him that, one of the best rappers in Canada, putting together an incredibly varied career of meaningful art and conversation. A longtime friend, so long time that I skipped the credentials. You are about to listen to a sampling of one of the many conversations that he and I have had over, yikes, almost 20 years of knowing each other. It's Shad, coming up on the Jon Corbin Podcast. It's the Jon Corbin Podcast. I'm here with my special guest. Who are you and what do you do?
My name is Shad Rakabango. I'm an artist. More specifically, I rap. And I also host a show called Hip Hop Evolution, or have hosted a show called Hip Hop Evolution. That's who I am, and that's what I've been up to.
Welcome, Shad. I'm so glad you're here.
I'm glad to be here, man. Been looking forward to this.
Oh, word. Shad, who do you hold close?
I hold close my family that I live with in this home. That's my wife, my 2 kids, and my brother. I hold close many communities here in Toronto, from my family to my friends, colleagues, church family, neighbors, and other communities I belong to, including the music community. But also people a bit scattered all over the country and all over the world. My parents live in Rwanda, and I have some friends there and most of my extended family. I have family in Houston, on my wife's side, family in Nova Scotia, New Jersey, and elsewhere. I've lived in Vancouver and have some dear friends there. I grew up in London. I have some dear friends there. Those are all the people I belong to.
That's a lot of people.
It's just who I am. That's my story. I like that phrase. I've come to like that phrase. They're all people I belong to. From the GTA on out to, many corners of the world. Like, these are all people I belong to.
That's got to be a pretty rich feeling.
I feel very, very fortunate. I feel like if I can hang on to if I'm blessed with many years and I can hang on to my mind, I'll be able to entertain myself by just thinking of all the wonderful people, that I belong to.
I want to ask, how do you manage? But what I'm wondering is, are you the kind of person that when you show up into any one of those communities, you can pick up where you left off? Do you feel a challenge to maintain connections with so many folks? How do you, I'll say, how do you manage?
Yeah. No, I think I understand your question. Like I said earlier, in many ways, I just feel like this is just who I am. It's just my story. It's just my life. So, I don't have much of a choice, and I don't feel like it's a challenge as much as it is a rich blessing, like you were saying.
That's good.
Like I think I understand, or I work on developing a sense of like what each relationship should feel like. It's just realistic, right? And but what it should still feel like. So picking up where we left off is not a bad way to put it. I do feel like that with many people, because the affection, for lack of a better term, is there. The love is there. The bond is there. That's probably the better word. The bond is strong. Even if the reality is, of course, if there's somebody in Vancouver, whatever, it's like we're not interacting on a daily basis, nor should we be.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like we should each be where we are.
Mm-hmm.
But the bond is strong, and it is what it is. So yeah, it's definitely part of my life is maintaining relationships, as it should be for anybody. But I do feel like it's a lot less of a challenge than it is just, you know, probably the greatest joy of my life.
That's real. Shad, what inspires you?
I love that question. Because some years ago, I stumbled on this definition of inspiration that really works for me. I feel like inspiration is when you see something pure. And that can mean many things. That can mean the honesty. That can mean the level of effort and attention that's been poured into the craft, you know, where it's really comes from a place of, you know, wanting to honor the craft and honor the audience. It can be a moment with one of my children, you know, but there's a quality to it that is just pure. It's clear, it's clarifying. And that is, so anything that is inspiring to me. I find that in music, obviously. I'm drawn to music naturally. I love music. And so when I find those moments in music, that fills me with inspiration, fills me with a desire to create. It clarifies what's inside me.
Okay.
That's probably the best way to put it. It clarifies what's inside me. I see something pure in it, and it helps me see myself more clearly and what I have to offer more clearly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was gonna ask, and then you said it, that it sort of sparks this desire to create. Can you describe that process when you catch that clarity?
Yeah.
And how you then respond, whether that's internally or then like moving to create? Are you able to articulate that?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'll just give an example. It's probably the best way to explain. Like, I heard a song on the radio the other day that I'd never heard before. It's a song called 17 Going Under. I looked it up. I looked it up afterwards. It's definitely got like a heavy Bruce Springsteen kind of influence, and it's one of those, you know, Bruce Springsteen-esque, like young, honest, raw rock songs. It's definitely, you know, it's been done a million times, but that doesn't make it any less honest or true when somebody does it, you know? And this kid really did it. And immediately I was just getting this clarity about my own life and story and feelings. And then, so to answer your question, I feel like what happens then is everything is poetry. Everything is beautiful. Anything you say, because it's true. That's really what I find is, as soon as I get to the truth, everything's good. So that's an example, you know, I heard that song. It's just really just clarifying for me, just filled me with like a clearer sense of my own story and my own life, and everything I was thinking and writing down. It was like, that's the best thing I've written in months. Just because it was true. Yeah. Just because it was honest. So that's really what the process is like for me, John. Or sometimes I'll just like, you know, sit down to work, like in a very workmanlike fashion of like, okay, time to work. And then I might again stumble upon something that is good to me, you know, feels true or just surprises me. That's always an indication for me too, is when I'm surprised by something I come up with, it feels better than me. That's when I'm like, okay, that's cool. Let me build on that.
I'm resonating with everything you're saying, and my mind half like leaking to those memories where I've had those similar experiences. I think the surprising stuff for me is usually like coming back to it, either a demo or even a finished song, and just like, yo, like I'm good.
Yeah. Yeah. You want to have that feeling.
Yeah. Yeah, for real.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. I resonate with a bunch of that. I was out with the kids tonight and watching them play soccer, and just threw on a song and boom, 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 like just that response, and then you want to write, and then like I find that especially if I'm responding to music, I want to join in the conversation.
Mm.
I felt that for years. I always thought it was a bit of an ego thing, but no, it's just actually your creativity inspires me to work.
That's right.
So it's like what I should have done, and maybe will do in the future, is insert myself into those songs, just for my own, my own conversation.
Yeah.
Record over this, the spare sections and all that kind of stuff, and it's your work inspires me, and so I wanted to join.
Yeah, that's a great way of thinking about it too. My wife Sheila and I, we use the word participate a lot when it comes to music. It's like ultimately that's what we love. We love just participating.
Mm-hmm.
We're inspired to participate. Like, yeah, we hear stuff we love. We want to join. We want to offer something to that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel that.
And then I guess like one of the things that's true in those moments is it doesn't matter if you made the song or if they made the song in Nigeria or South Dakota or Germany. They're just a person making music. It doesn't matter if they have 1 million streams or 7. They're just a person making music. And all of a sudden, like,
Yes.
yeah, there's this leveling or flattening here where it's like, no, you did something and I can respond. Like, I wanted to participate. And maybe what I make then I can share with my community or whatever, but you're just a person. You're not what the industry has built you up to be, or any industry.
Yes.
You just make music.
Yeah, that's it. It's just like, if we want to get woo woo about it, which I love to do, it's just, it really is just inspiration passing around.
Yeah.
That's all it is, and you receive it and then you pass it on. Whether that's to your, like you said, whether that's to a local community or whether that's to 1 million people on Spotify, it's like, it's still the same thing. You got something and you're passing it on. And that thing encourages more people to participate.
I imagine that you would have had to keep some form of that approach in mind when you are sitting down with major hip hop artists or notable people through your one of your past jobs at CBC. I imagine that you would need to be level-headed and maintain a consideration of the humanity of the folks that you're interviewing.
Yeah, absolutely. I loved that about both jobs. It's just that hosting in that true sense of the term, of like, this person is my guest, my invited guest, and it's my job to be the first to disarm myself, right? In order for them to feel welcome and for them to feel like they can be a human being. And I love that, because they are human beings, but the dynamic of those conversations when they start is, I'm nervous, and they're nervous.
Yeah.
Because they're meeting a stranger and they're going to be asked they're going to be asked to tell their story, and it's going to be documented in some form. So they're nervous, no matter what their stature is. And I'm nervous, obviously. So how can I facilitate that? I have to start. I'm the host.
Right.
I have to begin by letting my guard down, my defenses down in some way. I have to, demonstrate my welcome, my humanity. I love that challenge. It's like I like when jobs present challenges that ultimately like just make you a better person. Like there's stuff they it's stuff you should do anyways, but then you have to. So
Yeah.
you know what I mean? I love that.
Well, we're recording Labor Day, and so tomorrow's the first day of school, and I'm back in class, and uh, yeah, what you just said articulated so much of that process, right? They're nervous, and so am I, and we have to figure each other out. And what an interesting posture. It's one I hope I've adopted for most of my career, but nobody's perfect. What an interesting posture to come in and sort of disarm yourself and be welcoming.
Yeah. Yeah,
That
it's I really like the challenge of the posture that you should maintain, because you kind of have to you should be disarming yourself, emptying yourself of as much ego and fear as possible, but not being empty, if that
right.
makes sense, right? Like you have to be a presence in order for them to have something to interact with. So you don't want to be vacant. You don't want to be nothing. You want to be the real you when
Yeah.
you take away the real humanity, when you take away all that other stuff. It's a good again, it's a thing that we should all do in our life, but when you have a job that forces you to, it helps.
Shad, describe yourself in one word.
This was the one question when I was preparing I was having trouble with.
It's the hardest one.
I mean, and I'm a rapper, I'm a poet. Concision is my forte, but one word is hard. Um, I am grateful.
Word. What are you grateful for?
I'm grateful for life. I'm grateful to be a part of a huge, unimaginably huge thing that I believe in my heart is fundamentally good. I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful for all the people I belong to, like we were talking about earlier. Um, I'm the sum of all those people,
Mm-hmm.
and so I'm grateful for that. Yeah.
Word. I I mean we're gonna talk about our connection, but I feel like
Mhm.
we've known each other for it's 2021. It might be 18 years, something like that. I can't remember if I met you in '02 or '03,
Yeah.
but knowing you that long, one of the words that I would use to describe you is convicted.
Mm.
That you have such strong conviction, even in the statement that you just said about the hope that this is good.
Mm.
That is not a universal statement,
No.
right?
No.
We are often wrestling with the difficulties in our world.
Yes.
That you would walk around with this hope that it's good
Mm.
demonstrates such strong conviction. There's a quietness about that, but I mean, I can't add in more words if I'm only giving you one word. But you know, watching your career, ways that you'll speak on certain issues, especially when it comes to say Indigenous issues in Canada, you follow, you learn, and then you speak,
Mm.
but you don't let go. Right?
Mm.
I didn't post this thing because it's the cool thing to do, and I'm gonna do it, or we're talking about it right now. No, that's not. No, you'll be there in 2 weeks. You'll be there in 2 months. You'll be there in 2 years. You're paying attention because of conviction.
I appreciate that. Well, I think the two things are related. What you're just talking about. Yeah, I'll feel it. I like to feel a sense of conviction before I enter into the conversation, before I make my contributions. But that's all really related for me to this idea that it's all fundamentally good, and this is what I have to offer to the big thing. I don't have to do everything. I can't do everything.
Mm-hmm.
So let me listen for what I can do, and try to sort of humbly offer that, and trust that that's it. That's what I got.
Right. Right. Playing your part, playing your role.
Yeah.
Okay. So I ask folks if they can remember our first connection. Can you remember where we met, or what's your earliest memory of you and I connecting?
Mm-hmm. I'm fuzzy on the details of like a first encounter, but I remember us connecting first around music, around Radio Laurier,
Mm-hmm.
I believe. And I knew you had a radio show. I saw you in there, in the booth, which is, for people that don't know, Laurier is kind of in the middle of the student center, so you could see the DJs playing the radio show. You could see who was playing whatever music was on Radio Laurier. So I remember, and of course, hip hop community at Laurier was small. So if someone was playing some hip hop on Radio Laurier, underground hip hop,
yep,
you're gonna get a sense of who they are pretty quick if you're into that, and peek into the booth and see what's going on. So that's how I must have come to know you and meet you. Must have been through Radio Laurier. But then we connected. We connected around music. We connected around deeper things too, faith and race. I remember you sharing some very brave and candid things about your own life story, and and we just continued to bond over like all these shared things. So yeah, I'm fuzzy on the details, John. Maybe you know better than I do of like a first encounter, but I do know it was music first. It was Radio Laurier, and that, yeah, that's what it was first.
Yeah, you're right about the music community, the hip hop community being small. You also reminded me about the intense divide between underground hip hop and like the club rap that was so heavily involved in 2001, 2, and 3. Like,
oh, dude, yeah. So, quick story on that. So,
okay,
the next versus battle is Ja Rule and Fat Joe.
oh my gosh!
And I was talking to my brother, who's 23.
Yep.
About that. He was like, "Oh yeah, who do you got in the versus battle?" And I'm like, "You got to understand, man. In my time, Ja Rule was a no-go. Like, he was a no-go.
What would I be without my baby?
Like, it was, he basically, to us, he stole DMX's style and then just like popified it. But I understand, to like his his cohort, a generation, actually, he's a different generation than me. His generation, yeah, he had hits. He had the radio hits that they loved as kids, So yeah, to your point, absolutely. That was maybe the peak of it. Kanye then collapsed it.
Yep.
He began to collapse it with the College Dropout and subsequent albums. But at that point, it was peak, man. It was peak.
So my roommate in first year, which was 2001, had a big stereo and loved Ja Rule. So I heard a lot of Ja Rule in my first year. Yeah, and then you remind me, like, yeah, I was at college radio when the College Dropout came out. I remember the DJ that like had the leaks and was playing them on the radio. And yeah, it totally collapsed it. But it's this thing, yeah, we were there. It's a very strange thing to
Yeah,
reflect on.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So okay, I'm glad I was right on that detail. It was campus radio where we connected first.
Yeah. So I don't often have details. I have about it. I did 2 years of college radio. I have a year and a half of shows archived
Oh,
just for
nice.
me to listen to, as I learned how to mix. Um, I practiced on the show mixing songs and putting together, extended mixes. But do you know who got me into radio, Laurier?
No,
It is your longtime collaborator, DJ Tilo.
really.
Yeah. Yeah. So like you said, you can see inside the booth, right?
Yeah.
So there's also there's microphones. I don't remember if there's one that went directly into the student center. I think it's probably just him talking on the mic, but he's like, does anybody want to learn how to scratch? He's saying this on the show. So, I saw this once and then I saw it twice, and eventually I just walked in and he's like, hey, have a seat. So this is my first year. I don't know anybody. I'm in a new city and I'm watching him scratch Slum Village records, and it's like, oh, this is really cool. I've never seen a DJ work up close before, and he's doing a great job of scratching. And then, I can't remember how many times I would sit in on the show, but at some point he said, you could do this. You just apply, tell them what music you want to spin, and they might take you. A very offhanded comment, but that changed the course of my life so tremendously.
That's so crazy.
Getting into radio and doing that show, and then that being an industry in where I was then like being sent music and contacts and all. It was, yeah. So
That's awesome.
Shout out to Tilo.
Yeah.
So then the next year, 2002, I started with the show, and again, I can't remember when you came on, but because the community is so small, there would be MCs that would want to come and freestyle on your show. And so I remember the homie Fraser McDonald, aka
Yes.
Soul Natural, aka shoot, how many names did he have? Lay Down the Mystic Ticket. I can't remember it. He had a bunch of them. Anyways, he was a guy that would freestyle. If you gave him, he would freestyle for how much ever time you give him.
Yeah, absolutely.
5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, he would just go. So that's how I learned to mix, is that I would try to keep his sessions going. So I'd have all these beats on CD, and I just would work on blending stuff so that he could just keep freestyling. And then one day he brought this guy into the booth and started freestyling with him about the class that they just had and like, how's their day going? And that was you. And I was so focused on mixing that I was like, I don't care who's on the mic, like, let's go.
Yeah.
But you had this, you played the shout out game, which I'd never heard before. And you were sending shout outs to all these different people, not name checking them. Like this one goes out to all the people who like to listen to the Roots. This goes out to people who like to wear Timberland boots. And I was like, this is a really unique way of freestyling, at least to me. And by the end of those 2 years, you had been on whenever you were around, coming to freestyle. I had met Cyril Garrett by then, had him as a guest on the show. There was another guy he wasn't from the school, but I connected with him. There was like 4 or 5 people, and we were just kind of kicking it, rapping together a little bit, planning on making music, and yeah, so it all came from that show.
Yeah. Yeah. It's awesome hearing these stories. Like, just on a personal level, it's so fun to remember that time. And then secondly, just thinking about how much music has changed, hip hop has changed,
Yeah.
the technology and everything. Like, yeah, we would freestyle forever. It was all we could do.
Mm-hmm.
It was all you could do to participate. Again, you receive
Yeah.
the inspiration, but this was just the kind of dawn of home studio setups, or not even really. I mean,
Yeah.
all of us at Laurier had our, what do you even call them? Computers, desktop tower. You got the big tower, and
Yeah.
if you have a computer at all, some people didn't even have a computer. They just used the campus ones. But man, it was so beautiful, right? Like, we just loved the music, and you're talking about being an in at that point, like having an in with the music industry, because yeah, how else are you going to find out about stuff
Mm-hmm.
and get new stuff and hear new stuff? I mean, it was being a campus radio DJ was such a great way of participating in music that, like, you couldn't otherwise, on a level that you couldn't otherwise, participate. So for many reasons, it's fun hearing those stories.
That's a great way of framing it, because I remember that's the energy that I had. I was so excited that I could participate in new ways.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
A buddy of mine that was had a website about hip hop called sphereofhiphop.com, and like writing him in response to like blogs that he posted, he'd write back, and we'd have these email exchanges, and getting like meeting managers and saying, oh, like, here, take this music, I want to see if you'd like it and play it on your show. And it was just a different level. Our first, Cyril had a microphone and a working computer. Like, we have one recorded song. We're from that group that we did like in Cyril's apartment one night. Like, it took, that was the early home studio recording.
Early, super, super the dawn of that. And like, so obviously, yeah, the quality is going to be what it is, but it was just the access. You didn't have it. So yeah, any way you could participate was so exciting.
Yeah.
It was so exciting and fun, and then the community was therefore like smaller, but the community around the music was smaller, but it was also, I don't know, there was an energy there, and a sense of connection that was stronger too. I remember seeing Chaos at the
Whew.
campus
At the turret?
bar. No, at Wilf's.
At Wilf's. Okay.
Just at the campus bar. Exit had just come out, and that's where I connected more with Sam Baptiste, who was another Laurier hip hop guy. He was there. He was one of 20, 30 people that were there.
Mm-hmm. Crazy.
Yeah.
30 people.
Yeah, of course. Because how could you hear about the music? How could you hear that the concert was happening? There's just no way. So yeah, what a fun time.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, I mean, saw Kanon out there when he was starting. I remember. So there were not a lot, but there were a few shows that had happened, and I remember going to one. That was like was Wilf's the restaurant?
Yes.
And the Turret was like the club?
That's right.
So we were at the Turret. I can't remember if it was Brass Monk. No, it wasn't Brass Monk, because I remember I interviewed them for the campus paper. Anyways, I don't go to the club unless there's music. So I wouldn't spend a lot of time at the club, but there was there was some kind of hip hop show there, and you and I were both there. And so in and amongst this loud, let me step back 1 second. So I knew a little bit about hip hop when I was in high school, but I felt late to the game. So when I got to know Tilo and some of the other DJs, I'd sit around and listen to them talk, and they would talk about Illmatic, right? And that was new to me, right? So I just sat and listened, but there wasn't as much that I could participate in. I wonder if this word is going to come up a lot. I enjoyed learning, but I couldn't really have intelligent conversation about hip hop albums. And so somehow you and I were at the Turret in this conversation, talking about music that we like. And I was really nervous because the music that I liked was so niche. And when I would sort of play it in high school, like for the basketball team, I sort of get laughed right out of the room. But I mustered up the courage to talk about stuff that I was listening to at the time, which two really influential albums for me were Transparent MC by MG the Visionary, and Raw Material by Marzil. Just mentioned them in passing as part of, and thought that no one would recognize it. And you said, "Oh yeah, I've heard those albums. They're pretty dope." And I thought, all right, I'm going to be friends with this guy.
That's awesome. Did you go to the Marzil show in Toronto? Was it like 03? Was I there with you?
I went.
Yeah.
I borrowed my friend's car. I didn't know how to park in Toronto, so I just parked on a road. I didn't pay. I didn't get a ticket. I didn't pay for parking or anything like that. Got that mug towed.
Oh no.
I left the show at midnight or whatever. No car, and figured out my way how to get a car out of the impound.
That's the worst feeling.
Well, it was because it wasn't my car. I had to call them at midnight and be like, "Yo, what's your license plate? I have to go retrieve your car."
Why? Oh, no reason. Just want to know if you know it.
Yeah, Marzil. I remember Cyril. I think Cyril might have put that show on. The Listener was there. That was a very heavy Deep Space 5. That was a fun show.
Yeah.
So I think at this one where I mentioned Marzil to you and MG, this is what I think happened. I think that you gave me your email address, just on a slip of paper. You wrote it down, and then and so I'm like all excited about being your friend now. And the next day I email you and I get a bounce back. It fails, right? And I'm like, this man gave me a fake email address. I was so mad. I was like, yo, you just didn't want to be friends. You don't have to be like that. Got all bent out of shape. And then a day or two later, because Laurier's campus is so small, like you see people all the time. So we just wound up leaving class, walking beside each other. It's like, I said, yo, I tried to email you, S. Cabargo at Hotmail. And he's like, no, my name's Cabango. It's like, okay, well, crisis averted then.
Poor penmanship.
Thankfully, we're still friends. Oh, man, memory lane. This is good. All right, so I ask the guests to bring a story either around some area that we've collaborated or something that relates to our show themes, creativity, inspiration, community, or learning. Shad, what story have you brought for us today?
So I'm remembering a time, John, where you organized a hang. And again, I'm fuzzy on the details. But we went to the campus radio, I believe, and had like a freestyle session.
Shoot.
And then went to your house, I think.
Yeah.
And hung out. And I bring that up because, it was a really nice day for one thing, and just kind of nice moment of like friendship and kind of solidifying, like you were saying, people would swing by the booth, freestyle, run into each other on campus, whatever. But that kind of solidified something, I think, in terms of friendship and relationship. But I also bring that up because it's you were ahead of your time with that. You were ahead of your age with that move, I feel like, of bringing people together. Most 21-year-olds, 22-year-olds aren't bringing community together like that. It's not something I learned how to do until much later. Decade later or more. So I bring that up to just shine a light on that gift that you have. I don't know how you managed to pick that up so young, but you brought people together and you solidified something. And And when I think about Laurier and those years and the fun we had participating in the culture of hip hop, it's like that day stands out for me.
Hmm.
You know, there are obviously all these moments, but those moments get, you know, more and more fuzzy. But that yeah, I don't know. That stands out for a couple of reasons.
Yeah. I did. I did two of them, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you did do two of them.
I wonder because I remember one was at a house, student house I had with my roommates, and then another one was like at my apartment.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that I would have been married. I got married my fourth year of university.
The
I
one
was
I'm remembering more is at the house, I think.
yeah, yeah,
That's the one I'm remembering more. And obviously, you know, we've remained connected and we've collaborated a bunch of times, but for some reason that stands out way back then stands out to me.
I'm curious that you using the word solidified.
Yeah.
Was that um, like solidified a connection or
It kind of named something that was happening. You know what I mean?
right,
That's what I mean.
right,
It took a community that was, you know, that was there and something that was happening and it crystallized it
right,
or celebrated it, you know,
yeah,
which again, like is something I didn't learn about doing until much later.
yeah. So I imagine that we would have come together and ate, and then what I did was book with the radio station, um, kind of off hours. It must have been a Saturday or
Yeah,
something
it was
like
like
that.
it was a Saturday, I think.
So they just gave us, Saturday night. That I don't know if they had anything going on, but like yeah, for a couple of 3 hours, booked the booth and just spun tunes, talked, freestyled together. People like I said, if you have a contribution or you want to bring a song, um, I still have those sessions too. I think Relic was there.
That was the first time I met Relic
Yeah.
that I
And
went
he
on to collaborate with a lot.
yes, I was it was interesting because let's see if I how many dots I can connect. So I met a guy who was managing some artists and he told me about Rel, who now goes by Rel McCoy. Back then he went by Relic the Oddity. And so I must have connected with him to get some music and convinced him, this hermit, to drive from Brampton to Waterloo, which he did a couple of times for me. He could do shows and stuff. But he, in his freestyle, I remember he said, "I've never been this far away from home." But I was playing this show for some other folks that were doing a little bit of mentoring with me, and they were listening to the freestyles and like the varying levels of skill that were there. And they actually picked out how well you and Rel clicked
Mhm.
with the rhymes, especially in the freestyles, going back and forth. Where like at one point Rel's clutching a little bit, and he like is trying to like he's like, I can't remember your name, and then you jump in on the mic and it's like, my name is Shad, and then start going, and then he starts hyping you up, and then you all are trading bars back and forth.
That's awesome.
That was really cool to see. Yeah, and it's like, I listen to it occasionally. It's a very sprawling show, but yeah, you're right about being there. It was a really neat experience to just have people come together.
It was a good energy that day. And yeah, and it was cool. Yeah, I remember that was my first time meeting Relic, but I had heard some of his tunes probably through you. And again, given that this was the era of just the dawn of home recordings, it was like, how's this guy making music that sounds this good?
Yeah.
I didn't understand.
Yeah, he was a hermit with a home studio.
Yeah. Yeah. This was like really, I had, yeah. the further we get on in history, the harder it is to remember that it was impossible to make music like that
Yeah.
sounded that good. Like to understand, to learn about sampling and how to really do it with the machines and process things properly. And yeah, so yeah, I do remember. I remember just a good vibe and good energy, and most of us knowing each other, but not knowing a couple of the people there, including Relic. But
Yeah.
you managed to facilitate and make it good.
Well, thank you for that memory, because it was really nice. I I remember I had a good group of friends in high school. We would get together and do a bunch of like I wanted to say nerdy things, but not really. Just stuff we were interested in. We did not have too crazy a life. We'd watch hockey. We'd have these you know, in the '90s, the Leafs and the Habs only played each other twice a year.
Yeah,
So those Saturday nights was like 15 people together watching hockey.
yeah,
And I always just liked that vibe. I did enjoy people that I knew meeting each other. It's an intangible thing for me, but it's something I quite enjoy. Yeah, it's funny. My story is going to be about this too, about that era.
mm,
Um, but yeah, there was a richness there that I appreciated, even within like a community that I didn't know too well. Yeah, I just really I really appreciated that connection. So I'm curious. You talked about what you saw there from that gathering, and it's not something that you learned till later. I'm curious if you recall how those things started to settle in, because it seems to me, by your discussion of like the idea of what it means to be a host, that hosting, that those connections have a lot of value to you
hmm
in your adult life. Like, how did that grow? Can you recall some things that brought that about?
yeah, big time. Well, I learned a lot. I learned a lot. Trying to think of some very formative experiences. The first that comes to mind is when I lived in Vancouver. Um, I was part of a community there that people know Commercial Drive, East Vancouver. It's very neighborhoody neighborhood.
Okay.
But within that, I was part of a friend group in a church community there that was very big on the local and very big on facilitating connections in community with the local, with really the people in front of you and around you, right in front of you and all around you. And what that involves, eating together
Mm-hmm.
on a regular basis, crossing paths on a regular basis, making sure that that happens. Having real conversations about real things, deep things on a regular basis. And so it's a very neighborhoody neighborhood, but it's also a transient neighborhood because it's a big city, it's expensive city, increasingly expensive. That connection is that much more precious. But also, yeah, but also it's more complicated. So, like, how do you form community? How do you form connection when you know that it might not last in the same form?
Right.
So I learned a lot from that time there about like those people really learned how to be wherever you are, which we talked about a little bit at the outset. Even if you might be moving on soon, still put down roots, still inhabit the place where you are, and connect with the people around you in an intentional way. And strangely, that makes it better when you do have to move on.
Right.
Strangely,
Yeah.
you know. So I learned a lot. I learned a lot about connection and community and placemaking and all that from my time there. Um, but also various people along the way that I just noticed have that ability to kind of intentionally reach out to people, and they just understand what it takes to build relationship. It just doesn't happen by accident, you know.
Right.
It's not, yeah, especially the older we get. You know, when you're young and you cross paths with a million people all the time, it's like, you know, whatever. But the older you get, the more you understand that no, it takes a level of effort and intentionality and all that.
I like that because if folks don't know, I'm a big Shad nerd. So I listen to all your interviews, and I've got a healthy collection of your songs with features and demos and whatever. But you did a podcast recently I haven't checked out yet. The podcast called Soft Revolution,
Mm-hmm.
and the title of the episode is "We Have to Get Back Together Again."
Mm.
And I mean, that resonates with me, knowing you, but also just some of the other interviews I've heard with you. It seems like we are going to need some intentionality to foster or reconnect in the ways that this world has disconnected us.
Oh yeah, man. Yeah, I totally agree. You know, and the sad thing is we can easily forget as human beings, you know, we're so adaptable. It's our great gift, but it also, the downside of it is, you know, we're so adaptable we can forget that we're missing something. That, you know, things aren't optimal. Things aren't, we're missing something. And like I was just hanging out yesterday with my oldest friend, a girl I knew from I've known since kindergarten, who married another very good friend, Justin, who does all my artwork and
Oh yeah, shout out
videos
to
and stuff.
Justin.
Shout out to Justin. So Justin married my oldest friend.
Oh word, that's dope.
So we were hanging out, and then hanging out with another friend that I've known since the ninth grade at a restaurant, and just having a great night. And like at the end of the night, we were remarking at how this restaurant facilitated our connection. You know, the food, the excitement of being there and enjoying that food together in this different space, the excellent, you know, food that we were having, the reason that it gave for us to not wear sweatpants for the first time in 18 months, the lighting, the time that we got to get, you know, 3 hours straight, you know, no kids, no cooking and washing dishes. And, you know, we were remarking at how that restaurant facilitated that connection.
Mm-hmm.
And well, we've forgotten that, you know, we haven't had these things for the last couple of years. So we'd all forgotten that that's the social function that these places serve. And so they can come to feel quite non-essential at a certain point, but it's like, no, it is essential. It's part of our culture in North America, you know? Yeah. And so we do have to remember we basically have to remember our culture. We had to get rid of it.
Yeah.
So we have to remember, we have to get back together, and we have to remember how we did that in our culture, what facilitated connection.
Man, that's real. We do forget. I've heard in other interviews you discuss that the content of your new album was conceived before we had this pandemic crisis. Mm-hmm. And you know, the elevator pitch, I think, for Tao is about these various aspects of human connection or human experience that we've lost touch with.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm struck with by what you said is that for those that remember, we need to share, we need to encourage, we need to exhort, we need to remind, so that we don't forget. I think that in my 2020 experience, speaking up in ways like that takes courage. I wonder if, as you head towards this album cycle with this very significant message, what are you feeling as you're approaching
I feel really excited, John. Like, I love talking about this stuff.
it?
It fascinates me, and I think it's really important. It's what I'm it's also what I'm drawn to naturally. I think every time I make an album, I'm always, while I'm making it, I feel like I'm on a very specific journey. I'm doing something very different than I've done the time before. Then I get to the end and I'm like, I just made the same album again. Every single time. Because at the end of the day, this is what I'm interested in.
Mm-hmm.
This is really the question that is like in my soul, which is it's just peace at the end of the day.
Yeah.
That's the thing I'm most interested in. Peace. How can I get along with myself, and how can we all get along? And how can we be well? How can we feel whole? How can I feel whole?
Mm-hmm.
That's the puzzle that really, when I started making music, people would ask me like, oh, you talk about some real things. Like, what's your message? And I was like, I don't have a message. I'm just kind of making. Now I'm like, oh, I totally have a message.
Yeah.
This is it. This is my message. This is what I'm on about. This is what I'm interested in. This is what I keep telling myself, So I'm excited to talk about it. And I feel like I think we need to talk about it. Like, we are recording this a week before the federal election. And I feel like this isn't even a time to talk about specific issues, because the real issue is we don't really have a society that we, we didn't celebrate Canada Day because we collectively decided we're not proud of our society, right? Which is good. Yeah. But where's the follow-up conversation? The follow-up conversation is like, okay, so who wants to lead? No, the follow-up conversation is, what can we be proud of? Who do we want to be that we can be proud of? That's the follow-up conversation, Yeah. So I'm excited to talk about all this stuff. I really feel like this is where we're at.
And this is, that leadership. I love this, but I've been passing it off as irritating. My summer book reading list was very small because I have 5 children. I got Propaganda's book, Terraform.
Dope.
And I got Sho Baraka's book, He Saw That It Was Good.
Dope.
Now, I knew a lot about Terraform. And you was it this year that you did the coffee chat with Propaganda on his Instagram?
Yes.
Yeah. That was fun to watch. You're out in Nova Scotia pretending to make coffee. So I knew about this book because he had to do more than an elevator pitch, because what is Terraform, right? It's the formation of worlds. And his idea, or his thesis, is that, we make up so much of our culture, right? We make worlds. We've been making worlds. Yeah. So let's make better worlds.
Yes.
Right? Let's make a better world. Let's decide to do it.
Yes.
And let's put this to the task. How can we connect with the soil, and how can we connect with people? And he's been doing a bunch of music that connects to it, that links these ideas together. And I go, that's great. I want to call it high-minded. I don't have a better word right now, but I'm going to take a bird's eye view of society, step back and think in ideals.
Mm-hmm.
And then Sho Baraka's book is about the same thing. It's like words create. So let's have better words. We have stories about ourselves.
Yeah.
We need to tell better stories.
Yep.
And I'm like, let's take your work, which is on that same tip, and put that into the mix.
Yep.
And we got some rappers out here in 2021 telling us to think bigger.
Yeah, we're all on the same wavelength. On that topic of stories, yeah, I was really thinking about that the other day, and I was thinking about how much how much time we spend in our own story in the age of social media.
Sure.
And what a small story that is, and how that makes us, it's not good for us. We have to spend time in better stories and bigger stories, because if we spend so much time in the story of ourselves, of course we're going to begin to think that it begins and ends with us.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And so if my story ends, then what else is there? There's nothing else. That's not good.
No.
It's not good for us as individuals, and it's really not good for us together. So absolutely, we need better stories, or maybe we just need to remember the good stories and spend more time in them than the very tiny story of ourselves. Of course, the irony is like these technologies are supposed to connect us to each other and something bigger, but they don't. We all know that. They make us actually just more and more immersed in ourselves and our own narrative. And it's not good. So I'm on the same wavelength as those guys, absolutely. And that's cool to see, especially after a year and a half apart, that okay, there's something in the air.
Yeah.
Feels that way to me, but I don't know. I'm sure everybody feels that way about whatever they're on about, so I don't want to put too much stock in that. But yeah, I don't know. That's really my sense of things, John, if I had to tell you. I think we're at a point where we do need to, I like what you're saying about prop too, like we need to decide. We need to decide what we want, what we think is good about human life. We got to make some big and fundamental decisions, I think. It's not just like which party do we want to vote for. It's much more fundamental than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's real. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back very shortly with my story on the Jon Corbin podcast. If you're enjoying these conversations about creativity, inspiration, community, and learning together, consider becoming a monthly supporter at patreon.com/Jon Corbin. Your monthly financial support not only allows the podcast to keep running, but it also enables it to reach higher heights. There are no tiers or levels of support. Simply pay what you choose. Patreon supporters get regular behind-the-scenes updates on the show, sneak peeks at upcoming guests, as well as access to whatever creative material I'm working on, whether that's exclusive songs, poems, essays, DJ mixes, and a whole lot more. Check it out at patreon.com/. We are back on the Jon Corbin podcast. My guest today is Shadrach Cabango, the homie Shad. We've been reminiscing. We have had so many stories. We won't be able to cover them all here through 18, 19 years of knowing each other. One of the things I have to say early is I'm really glad. Like I can say to people, I was there when you won the competition with the Kitchener radio station that got you the money to record your first album. Like I can say I was at that showcase. I watched you compete against Rufus, the singer, and pull out a guitar and get a band and rap your way to your first record. It's amazing to me.
That was again, we're talking about a bit of a different era, if you happen to listen to the radio, know about that competition, know about the event, be friends with people that were in it, then maybe you were there. Anyways, I don't want to cut you off, but yeah, like there wasn't much about it on the internet. You know what I mean? Like it
No.
was early days.
Yeah, I remember like, when the album came out, then that was that was a part of the press, like that you had won this competition, and it's a cool story that again wouldn't necessarily be ubiquitous locally, but
Yeah.
if you listen to that kind of music and you listen to that radio station, then you're gonna find it.
Yeah.
What was neat is you're making the album, and I guess what I was thinking about was the number of ways that you made space for me, even after that fact, because certainly I never felt entitled, so I always felt honored. And there was a season where I think when you were an independent artist, where we could invite each other to stuff. That the nature of that changed when you got signed to label and played bigger shows and that kind of stuff. But I remember you joining me at my church. The church was connected to a wider network of pastors, and my pastor wanted us to rap for this group to show folks like how hip hop and faith expression can coexist, which is quite forward thinking in some senses. But I remember you brought out the guitar and did rock to it, and I backed you up. There was some show in a school in London that you brought me to open. You had our band open at one of the 2 old Prince release parties that were in London.
That's right. Yeah. Call the office.
Man. Like I'm just, again, yeah, I'm not owed any of it. I didn't even know necessarily what I was doing. I've always sort of been indie, and I've, built a career and a family, and just am blessed to do music. Ajax 2011, you were playing a church in Ajax. That one I called you and said, hey, and you were able to get, they didn't have an opener, and you put in a good word for me, and that led to some cool opportunity as well. But I've been thankful for the ways that you've made space. And I've been like going back and forth on my story because in my last year of university, I promoted a show that was like easily one of my favorite concerts. Mike Downing was the host. He's now goes by John Orpheus. He just wrote this amazing book called Saga Boy. Fraser opened. Cyril and I did a set. You and Relic both performed, and it was just, we blew the roof off the place. It was wonderful. But I think my story is going to go just a little bit further back. In between that sort of the group of us coming together, talking about, coming together, freestyling on the show, doing that big, long, extended show is, I think, crystallized things for you. At some point, there was a group of 5 of us that were talking about making music. I think you had a song recorded with a DJ named TM Jukes, but it was within a group. And you were occasionally performing with Bread and Water.
That's right.
Which was the group.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can recall. I don't feel like you had incredibly high aspirations with making music. I mean, you're in school.
Yeah.
But at some point we said, like, we should do something as a group, and had some beats and we're working. But what stood out more for me than the music that was never completed was a time that we went to a place called the Lotus Tea House in Waterloo, and it was a tea house. It was vegetarian food and tea, and We had a lovely time, the 5 rappers sitting there drinking tea and talking about life. But we were talking about if we were going to do music, what would we do, and sort of trying to coalesce some ideas. And one of the things that you said that stood out to me, it's always stood out to me, is that you said, like, what I like about this group is that everyone is that dude. It's like Fraser, he does freestyle and talks philosophically, and that he's just that dude. And like Jamie, he does this and this and this. He's that dude. And Cyril, he's like theology and like preaching and this crazy wordy raps. He's that dude. To me, it was like we're all us. This is before. Yeah, I'll say it. This is before any of the contests or getting signed or heavy touring or all the ways that your life would change. You've still always been that dude.
Mm.
And I actually, like, I'm amazed because I don't think it means that you haven't changed. I think you're a person of conviction. I think you hang on to your convictions. I think, the world changes, and, I don't know if you ever thought that you'd be on a plane as much as you've done or traveled as much as you've done or had all these interesting experiences, meet all these interesting people. But again, I've known you for so long. You've always been that dude.
Mm.
Does that resonate with you? Like,
I appreciate that. I don't have much perspective to be able to say really if it resonates, but I really appreciate that, John. Like, because I think it's a good thing. You're not saying, you're saying, I think you're saying you haven't changed in the good way. You know what I mean? Like, in the good way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And even that idea that you're talking about, like, of seeing good in people. It's like, that's one of my favorite things about music too, is I feel like in the community of music, one unique thing that we really get to enjoy is we get to really see each other and the beauty in each other in a way that I don't imagine other people get to in a professional environment. You get to see one side of your colleagues, maybe, you might get to see them shine, but we really get to see each other's soul, And I love that. I love that about my friends in music. It's like, I get to see this, enjoy this distillation of who they are. It's a very beautiful thing.
I get the sense that you treasure it.
I really do. I really do. I've come to think of it in terms of painting lately. Like, everyone has certain colors that they paint with, like, emotionally. So myself, for example, like, when I make music, the tools that I have to engage people for the most part are like humor and the amount of thought I might put into an idea. These are the colors that I paint with, and some emotion, but in a specific kind of way. I paint with emotion. Then there's other people that, wow, their music is just so rich with emotion. It's just so emotional, or they can really express rage, let's say. I can't do that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I've really come to admire the different colors that people paint with in their music. I really feel like that's like their soul. And I really treasure that I get to see that with all my friends. When they get up on a stage or when they send me music, I'm like, yo, like, this is this person's soul. This is the colors that they paint with so beautifully. I don't have access to all of them.
Right.
Anyways, I'm kind of like rambling, but yeah, I'm just saying all that to say I still treasure that.
Yeah, I think in that sense, like, I think I think then, yeah, with those connections, those people, those communities, it makes you a very rich man.
It does make me a very rich man.
Yeah.
Yep, I'm touched by it every time.
I'm curious about this. Um, you can see how people paint.
Hmm.
There is a sentiment. Um, I'm sure it's in all. I'm sure it's in all creative art forms. But I'll think about rappers specifically. We get to that point where it's like, I wish I could do that.
Yeah,
Um, we enjoy it, but yeah, like I wish I could do that. Or
yeah,
the I wish I made that song.
yeah,
How do you have those experiences? How do you process that? Because I think that we
for
could
sure.
learn from people
Hmm.
and maybe adopt new practices, but it's a very fine balance, like
Yeah,
knowing who you are and engaging other people's work.
yeah, totally, totally. That's such a it's like a challenge, but it's like it's also where the beauty is, right? Like I always think of things like I was saying before we started recording in basketball terms. So
Mm-hmm.
like Steph Curry and LeBron James. You know, Steph can't. Steph can be like, man, LeBron can just do everything on a basketball court. It's unreal. You know, go grab the rebound or block a shot on that end, take it the length of the court, post a guy up. But Steph has to be like, but I'm Steph
Yeah.
and I can do my Steph thing.
Yeah.
You know, and if you really do it well, you change the game and people try to start to play the way you play.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like that's the beauty of it. That's kind of part of the charm of it too, right? Like Steph comes in, now everyone wants to shoot from half,
Yeah.
but there's still only one Steph.
True.
There's still only one Steph,
Yeah.
and I feel like it's the same thing. Like I'll see I'm trying to think of someone with quite a different skill set. Like every time I play with Cardinal, like I hate playing with Cardinal. Yeah, I hate playing with that guy. He's like the only guy I just loathe being anywhere near any stage that he's gonna go on. He destroys everything.
It's crazy
He
energy.
just he just destroys everything. There's nothing left.
Yeah.
There's nothing left. Um, I admire it so much.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like he's that guy, and it forces me to go deeper into what I do. I can't do that.
Yeah.
I'm imagining Steph like watching Braun. It's like I can hit the weight room
Yeah, but
and
I
trust
ain't surviving in the paint.
and trust me, I'm gonna hit the weight room, but I'm not coming out like Braun. I could spend my whole life in there. I'm not coming out like Braun. Um, but I'd imagine that forces Steph to lean into what he does, and go, I want to be as great as Braun. I just have to do it my way.
Right.
Or I want to help a team win,
Mm-hmm.
but I gotta offer what I can offer to help a team win. And yeah, it's gonna inspire me to go in the weight room, but like not with any illusions I'm gonna come out like Braun. But yeah, it inspires me to do that too.
Yeah, I'm gonna put in work.
I'm gonna put in work. I'm gonna try and add some of what that person does well, But ultimately, it's about leaning into what I do well to extend the Braun Steph metaphor. It's like, look what they both bring to the NBA,
Right.
Together they've elevated basketball. Together they've given us 4 NBA finals or something, like
Mm-hmm.
I think about hip hop the same way. I've come to love that feeling of seeing an artist and being like, oh, like I wish I could do that. That's when it's good.
Right.
But that's their colors that they paint with. I don't got them, or I don't have all those reds.
Yep.
I got a couple of them, but that person, they have every shade. So yeah.
That's good. I like that. When I started with Lost and Found Music in 2016, I was working with Jermaine, and first in a consultant's role, maybe a creative director at some point. But we used to talk about forming a team of artists with the same basketball metaphors. We would identify the kind of players that he currently had on the roster.
Yeah.
And the artists and their sort of NBA equivalents.
Yeah.
And then that was then our strategy for, here are the skill sets that we need to complete this basketball team. And those are the kinds of people that we're going to look for locally to find.
That's cool. That's cool. I love that.
Have you ever thought about your NBA or your basketball equivalent and your contribution to the rap game?
The weird thing is that it's the players that look like me. I feel
physically look like you.
Physically look like me. I'm like, for some reason, I feel like this is me. Sam Cassell.
Sam Cassell, right?
I am the Sam Cassell of the game.
I love
For some reason, it's just true. And then this year in the NBA, a few people have pointed out to me that I resemble Chris Middleton a little bit.
Oh yeah, there was some Instagramming going on during the finals.
Yeah, there's a little Chris Middleton to my flow, but I think I'm Sam Cassell of the game.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny.
I'm the Sam Cassell of the game, and I can't even put my finger on why, but it's just true.
Well, Sam had an edge,
yeah,
for sure, but he just ran it.
Yeah,
that's the interesting thing that I like about his game. He's like, there were players on his team that were better than him,
yes,
and bigger than him,
yeah,
but he ran it.
Yeah, that's true.
That was his team.
That's true. Yeah, just he shows up in Houston. Houston was like the weirdest champion ever. It really is just like Akeem, especially the second time around, or no, maybe it was the first time around. Yeah, not your classic championship roster.
Mm-hmm.
And Sam Cassell was just like a rookie or a second year player or something. But he just stepped right in, did his thing. And then he kicked around the league. He was a good player for a while. Might have snuck on one all-star team somewhere along the way, Played with the Bucks. They had a couple good teams. Or Minnesota. Yeah, it was Minnesota. They were all right. He's a guy that if you really know the era, you'd be like, oh, no, he was nice. Yeah, he was nice.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
boy.
I don't know. But I truly can't put my finger on it. It's really just more of a feeling.
Yeah, it's not something I've spent a lot of time thinking about, but it's a fun little exercise. I think you might be selling yourself a little short at Sam. But what's interesting is I doubt that you've spent a lot of time thinking about this, but I always found it interesting that you being a part of Hip Hop Evolution, I wonder if you had that reaction, or there would be folks that you'd be interviewing and be like, the self-focused nature of the United States, and your forays into your forays into states. You tour a lot there, but I don't know how much the big hitters know your name, but I bet when they heard you after, they'd be like, oh yeah, he's nice. He's nice. I wonder how much time you spend thinking about like your place in hip hop now that you've gone and talked to pretty much everybody.
Yeah. I mean, I think I see my place as kind of unique in the sense that a lot of the people we interview, they're part of some kind of movement, if that makes sense. Like A Tribe Called Quest, De La Soul, they were great in and of themselves,
sure.
but what they all represented together as the native tongues why they were part of hip hop evolution, or the examples go on and on. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of there's a lot of great hip hop artists that aren't in hip hop evolution, and largely because they aren't part of a larger narrative.
Right.
You know, as Naughty by Nature was just a great group. You know, but they weren't part of a larger thing that was happening.
Mm-hmm.
You know, within hip hop. I think I'm probably something like that in Canada,
Right.
in the sense that, you know, I've enjoyed a good career thus far, but I don't think you're telling a larger story about Canadian hip hop through my work. My work's kind of just been its own thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe that's fair to say. Yeah, I'm really a product of my era for sure, in the sense that I started independent, you know, when that started to be more and more possible.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, launching yourself internationally as an independent in hip hop coming from Canada still wasn't quite possible.
Yeah.
My career is mainly here, but that's also informed by like my influences from the 90s and early 2000s in terms of underground hip hop and artists that really had a sense of place. I mean, that's true all through hip hop, you know. So that's something I've always leaned into, that this is where I'm from and this is who I'm speaking to. I guess all that to say, yeah, I feel like I have a place in this country, in this country's musical conversation, cultural conversation, but it's always been kind of uniquely my place. I don't think I'm part of a bigger movement. I don't think I'm seen as, I don't think I'm viewed as part of a bigger movement or scene or anything like that.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. That would be my sense of me in the context of, you know, hip hop in this country.
Yeah, it does make sense for sure. I mean, like when I was in university and watching much music, I was seeing Chaos and Cardinal and Kanon, and take their work internationally.
Yeah.
And then when Drake comes and shifts things, you know, there was a period of time there where it was, or you could say, oh, do you know Shad? No. I mean, he's a really excellent lyricist. I mean, you know Drake, right? Yeah, he beat Drake in the Junos.
Yeah.
I think their music's probably quite different. And I think what Drake did, you know, shifted things so significantly.
Yes.
So yeah, that's well said. That's a good. It does come back around to this idea of being that dude, is that you really have to have a good sense of self.
Yeah, I think that's where I get to. That's how I've gotten to participate. You know, is for the most part, in the musical landscape of this country and the cultural conversation in this country. That's where I've been able to participate, to make my contributions, and I'm very grateful for that. And then that like the way things sort of happen to land in time is just it's interesting to me. You know, Drake changed everything.
Yeah.
You know, it's to the point where it would be very easy to almost not remember anything in Canadian hip hop before Drake. He really changed everything.
Yeah.
And so I hope somebody will capture the history here to say, hey, you know, Cardi's a monster, Chaos is a monster, Mishi Me, Maestro, Dream Warriors. Like we've had hip hop here for a long time, and it's been excellent. You know, just to you know, make sure that's there and captured, because once Drake came along, like the ceiling was smashed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's so positive for hip hop artists here, but it's like to the extent where like, yeah, you might not remember that there was anything before. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's good to have these conversations then, so that we don't forget.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, that's my sense of things. Sam Cassell of it all.
We got game Sam Cassell.
Yes.
Um, we've talked. We'll wrap up here. We've talked a little bit about the album Tao coming out. I'm curious if you have, like you said, you've been able to participate in the musical conversation here in this country and the cultural conversation. The cultural one, I've seen more opportunities for you over the years. I mean, obviously, being a part of the national broadcaster is one thing, but I also feel like you brought yourself to that in ways that won't get credited, or maybe later it'll be like, yeah, he was nice. He was nice. You were one of the, listening to that show prior. Um, what I saw you do in small measure, and I thought would have come more if you had more time, was find the through lines between the guests, within a week. What did you learn within a week?
Mm-hmm.
You were a reflective dude. I'm digressing here, but I'm just publicly giving you props
Mm-hmm.
for finding lanes within that show. I hadn't heard people do that. Like, oh, this interview connects with this interview. Really? Yeah, because I'm actually thinking about it, and this is what can help us going forward.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, that's cool. I do think that's the purpose of the show.
mm-hmm.
That to me is the purpose of having a arts and culture entertainment show, is to help people navigate all of the changes in our in our cultural landscape, and say, hey, like, this is what's happening. You're listening to some of the better artists in the world tell you about what they're doing and their sense of things, and through that, hopefully, you're getting a sense of how the world is shifting.
I appreciate that you took the time, because we have grown up in the era of late night television interviews, which are prepackaged, and in the era of YouTube, we'll
Yeah,
get those highlights that are great for YouTube, but we don't always see the through lines there, which
it's
I
cool.
was glad that you did. There's some ways in public, and shoot, Canada Reads being a part of, like, there's ways that you've participated in cultural conversations. I would say, like, more publicly. I think last year we participated in something in Milton, virtually, with Black residents of Milton, and having uh, uh, a different kind of public conversation. All of that to say is, do you have any hopes for the conversations that you want to have through this album?
Mm. Yeah, I do. I hope for like you mentioned the podcast that I did, the Soft Revolution podcast with Torque Campbell of Stars
Mm-hmm.
and Ali. Um, and the headline of that is like a spiritual revolution.
Right.
And I do hope for something like that, in the sense of, like I was saying, I want us to get to a soft place. I want us to get to a fundamental place in our conversation, in the larger cultural conversation. I want us to get past issues and down to the really basic questions of, what do we as a society think a human being is? Do we think it's sacred or not? Or data points?
Right.
Really, what do we think about that? And what do we think, based on that, maybe, what do we think a human being deserves to have? Healthcare, housing, clean food, clean air, access to water. But it comes down to, like, what do we want?
Right.
What do we want? It's actually not a question. It's actually a super, not, it's not an easy question. for us as individuals, let alone as a society. But I want us to turn there more. And I want us to, maybe even more than that, I want us to turn there together. I think there's one thing I keep thinking about as I was making the album, and even now afterwards, is like, we are social creatures and we need each other. There's nothing that can be achieved by ourselves. And that's a lot of the rhetoric that's out there, consciously or subconsciously. There's a voice that says, if we want to fix it, we got to, each of us individually, do this or do that, you know, or not just do this or do that, do this and do that and do that. And then self-care too, because you're going to get tired, you know? No, we need each other.
Mm-hmm.
We can't do anything by ourselves. We can't, no individual can stray that far from the rest of the human family to just, whatever. We're all implicated, you know? Mm-hmm. We need each other. So that's, I want us to start thinking more in those terms. And to that point, my album can't do it. I can't do it, you know, but maybe my album and that other person's album and that other person's album and that other person's album and all these different people can help steer us back together. But I would love to see that revolution happen where we're steering back towards each other, towards the land, towards the transcendent, you know, towards all the things that we truly need and I think want.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So I'll tell you this.
Yeah.
Because the very next thing I thought in my head is, I don't really know what I want. Which is Ian Kamau's opening line on your song from The Old Prince.
That's right.
Which my grade 9 students are going to be studying this semester.
That's awesome.
I'm really excited about it.
That's awesome. Well, you know, I came across Ian Kamau when I was at Laurier. He was opening for Chaos.
That's right.
At Fed Hall at Waterloo. I was blown away by him.
And I've always seen your reverence for his work. Yeah, that was a good get.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, I think I've lost this file, but I remember the MySpace version of that song that you put out that had Lauryn Hill on it.
Oh, wow.
I remember I'm pretty sure I had that file.
Yeah. I remember there was totally another version. We changed it up for the album.
Yeah. The Lauryn Hill inspired tune.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm excited. I mean, I'm excited for Tal. I honestly have been going back into your old work. I've heard pastors say that they only have one sermon. They preach the same sermon. And you kind of said the same thing with music, but I think it's an important conversation because we are so prone to forgetting.
Yeah.
If you want to continue to make us albums on the same vein and foster conversations, I mean, I'm here for it, and we definitely need it. So I
appreciate that.
Personally, I have stayed away from. I've listened to your singles once each, just to know what's good, and then I'm just letting it breathe until I can take in the whole project. Tunes like God and Black Averageness really pique my interest.
Nice.
So I'm very willing to go in blind, but I'm really appreciative that you would join us today, share your heart and mind, and I think I'm really looking forward to seeing what conversations come from this new work.
I appreciate that, John. I've been looking forward to this. Glad we got to do it.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming, but I think this is the right time. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Love you, buddy.
All right. Love you too, man. Peace. Thank you so much for listening to the Jon Corbin podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, why not become a part of it? Hit me up on social media. Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram are all at Jon Corbin Music. That's JONCORBIN. That's right. It's John with no H. You can stay on top of my music and creative work at joncorbinmusic.com. Finally, if you're enjoying this podcast, please like, share, favorite, and subscribe. Spreading the word is one of the best things you can do to help this podcast grow. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you again soon.